Good evening. I'm political editor Dennis Welch, and this is Politics Unplugged. Election day, 29 days away, and the race taking another turn this week, or this past week, which just days ago we learned that the president has been infected with coronavirus. And we'll have more on that later. But first, Arizona has several key races we are tracking here on Politics Unplugged tonight. And perhaps the biggest one is the Senate race between Martha McSally and Mark Kelly. This is a seat that's a big deal because it is one that is more likely of the Senate seats that could flip across the country and possibly help Democrats control the Senate. Now, right now, it appears Mark Kelly has the edge in this election. Several polls done this past week show Kelly ahead, but they vary anywhere from him leading by 4 points to as many as 9 points. And I got a chance to sit down with Mr. Kelly one-on-one.
And first of all, I just want to welcome you back to the show, Mr. Kelly. Thanks for taking some time to talk to us here about this. And once again, this has, been an election cycle unlike any other. We got another bombshell report the other night, that President Donald Trump and his wife has tested positive for COVID-19. I want to give you a chance to respond to that news.
Well, it's very unfortunate. Gabby and I wish the First Lady and the President a speedy recovery. And hopefully, it doesn't get, their symptoms don't get worse.
Certainly. But, the election here does move on, certainly for you. Voters are going to start casting ballots here in days. There's less than about a month left in this election. For you, it's one of the top Senate races in the country. You are leading in the polls. You could be sworn in early since this is an election to fill Mr. McCain's seat. So I got to ask you this. One of the first actions, if you do win this race, could be supporting the majority leader. Where are you on supporting Chuck Schumer, who could potentially be leading the Senate chamber if the Senate Democrats do take a majority? Would you be voting for Mr. Schumer?
Yeah, well, I don't know who's going to be running for majority leader. We've got 31 days or so to the election, and that's not what Arizonans are thinking about right now. So, obviously, I will have to make the decision when I get there, but I really don't have any idea right now.
But he has been supportive of you, financially, as well as said nice things to you about you and championed you in media. In fact, you met with him last year. It's been reported. Does that kind of support come with strings attached and some sort of expectation on your part that you support him for this job?
Not from my side. It certainly doesn't. I'm going to make decisions as a U.S. Senator with one thing in mind, and that's what is in the best interest of Arizona and what's in the best interest of our country.
So you can't tell us right now, like, whether you would support him or not. But
I don't even know who's going to be, who wants to be majority leader at this point. I assume Senator Schumer does, but maybe somebody else does as well.
Okay, and let's move on with that. This past week, Mr. Schumer says that all options are on the table if the Senates do get the majority. One of the things he did mention was elimination of the filibuster. Of course, that is a rule that requires 60 votes for cloture. It's a procedural move, but it does have an impact on the kind of legislation and policy that will be passed out of that chamber. I'd like to hear from you specifically. Do you oppose or do you support eliminating the filibuster?
Well, this is a Washington question about a rule in the United States Senate, and I think we all realize Washington is pretty broken right now. And decisions like this, I'll carefully consider them. And, whether changes to the Senate rules are appropriate or not. And, if this could make a difference for Arizona. But here's one thing, kind of like the previous question, I'm going to make decisions that are in the best interest of our state and our country, and not a decision that's in the best interest of one political party or another.
So that's not specific. You said you're still going to, consider that. But, without elimination of this filibuster, a lot of the agenda of the Democrats, your agenda would be harder to pass because you would need that 60-vote threshold to get anything to the floor.
I have not made a decision on this. But what Arizonans really care about is issues like healthcare and the economy. And I think, Dennis, this really highlights, and you point this out, what could you get passed with it, without it? It highlights that we need independent leadership in the United States Senate that's focused on solving problems, not focused on politics or political parties. Senator John McCain that's what he was about. And Barry Goldwater and my wife, Gabby Giffords, working across the aisle to accomplish hard things. So you got to, I think these problems are really, really hard to solve. And no one party is going to get us through, whether it's this crisis or get the economy back on track. It's critical that we do this together in a bipartisan way.
I do want to also ask you regarding another issue that Mr. Schumer has brought up that could be on the table, and that is statehood for D.C. and potentially Puerto Rico becoming a state if they do choose to do that. That would give the party, Democrats, potentially more power in the Senate, because it's kind of assumed that those two areas would vote for Democratic senators out there. Do you support these moves that Mr. Schumer has said could be on the table?
Well, I'm not paying attention to what Chuck Schumer is saying every single day, and this is Washington politics, and I think it indicates that we've got some serious political problems in D.C., and that's why I think change is important. I haven't given it a lot of consideration. I do, in general, think people deserve to have representation, and if it comes up, it's something I will seriously consider. But like the other two issues you mentioned, majority leader, filibuster, I'm going to make a decision that's what is in the best interest of our state and our country.
Yeah, but don't you think that you're going to do stuff that in past legislation that you believe is in the best interest of Arizona voters, but don't Arizona voters deserve specific answers for you on this? Now, they may be Washington questions, but they do have big implications, again, on what kind of legislation does come out of Washington.
Yeah, they could have big implications. That's I agree with that. And when I make these type of decisions, I'm going to let Arizonans know where I stand.
Yeah, but it was again, like I said, we're about a month left in this election. You're not thinking about these issues. These could have big consequences. Shouldn't you be thinking about them, and shouldn't you be more direct with voters, whether you support them or not? And we're not.
Well, what I've been thinking about is what I'm hearing from voters as I've now virtually traveled, through the state since we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I'm talking to folks that are having to make these horrible decisions about whether they pay their rent or fill a prescription, buy groceries. These are the things that Arizonans are worried about. We have 440,000 individuals, I think, right now, who are trying to get by on $240 a week of unemployment assistance. And we have a United States Senate that went on vacation. I mean, that's not leadership. We need independent leadership in Washington working on solving these hard problems, not folks that decide, hey, it's the middle of the summer, I got to get back to whatever. Let's go back to our states. We have an economic crisis and a healthcare crisis, and I still don't see the plan.
Mm-hmm. And I kind of want to wrap up. I believe we only have about another minute here left, and I do want to ask you about this. And recently, we did see some reporting on the release of Donald Trump's taxes, President Trump's taxes out there. Now, the reason I bring this up is because your opponents have been hitting you pretty hard with some of your business ties and business dealings. You don't have to release your taxes, but do you have any plans to release your taxes? Because you are again being attacked for some of your business ties. Would you do that as other senators across the country? Some of them have done this.
Yeah, I don't have any plans, and I think what got highlighted there about the president's taxes is that we have a tax system that favors the wealthiest Americans and big corporations. And we've got folks, in our state that are working really hard to get by, and they pay their fair share. And we've got to fix the tax system and get more relief to middle-class families and small businesses. I am really, Dennis, you know this. We passed a $1.9 trillion tax cut that went in 2017 that went to the wealthiest Americans and big corporations, supported by my opponent. 80% of that will go to the wealthiest and big corporations. That's not sticking up for middle-class taxpayers.
Okay, just to be clear, though, you will not be releasing your taxes.
No, I have no plan to do that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mark Kelly, Democratic candidate for the U.S. Senate. Thank you very much for joining us again on the show, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you for having me on.
And still ahead, we're turning our attention to another big race, the Arizona race for the Maricopa County Attorney's race. Now, hear from current County Attorney Alistair Adele about her plans for re-election and her push for police accountability by law enforcement wearing body cams. And welcome back to Politics Unplugged. We want to turn now to another big 2020 race, and that is the Maricopa County Attorney race. Now, currently, County Attorney Alistair Adele is facing off against her Democratic challenger, Julie Gunnigal. Last week, we had Gunnigal on Politics Unplugged. Here's a piece of that interview where she discussed the importance of the county attorney position.
In this position is the discretion to charge any of the felonies inside that happen inside Maricopa County and all the misdemeanors in our unincorporated areas. That alone is an enormous amount of power.
Now, last month, Maricopa County Attorney Alistair Adele did not pursue criminal charges against a trooper who shot and killed Deon Johnson. Now, during that May incident, the trooper says he got into a struggle with Johnson on Loop 101. The trooper was not wearing a body camera, something Adele called a concern. Now, Adele pushed the state to equip DPS troopers with body cameras, and this week we've learned that is going to become a reality. 150 body cameras are going out to DPS troopers to increase transparency and hold police accountable. And joining me now is Alistair Adele, the Maricopa County Attorney. Thank you very much. Now, obviously, this year we've seen a lot of attention about criminal justice reform and questions about policing and their behavior. First of all, talk to us again about that Deon Johnson situation. Some people are still maybe not crystal clear as to why you decided not to charge the DPS in this specific case.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. My answer to that is that my commitment to transparency and accountability is that we expanded our critical incident review team to have non-lawyers on there to give a better perspective about what is the right thing to do for the right reasons. But ethically, our standard is there a reasonable likelihood of conviction? And that's why I've implored people and our governor from the day I started. This did not start with Mr. Deon Johnson. From the day I started, I have said more evidence it's useful. We need body-worn cameras. We just didn't have the evidence to pursue ethically with a reasonable likelihood of conviction. And since the murder of George Floyd, the communication, the climate of our country has changed, and we need to have these conversations. And I am committed to that and transparency and having those conversations.
Yeah, and you've read these files. You've seen some of the video that has come from that. There was some video that actually Channel 3 that the Arizona family actually had. What was your takeaway when you watched this video? What was your takeaway when you read these reports?
You know, I read everything, and I took the committee's advice along with our civilian members, which I added during my term to make sure that, again, commitment to transparency, that we had community members on the committee. We had 4 for this particular one. This was a tough decision.
Was it?
And we cannot make these decisions in haste or without empathy.
No,
and I cannot imagine what Mr. Johnson's family is going through. But we have to abide by our ethical standards in this case.
Was it a concern, though? I know these are tough cases. You've got to make the final call on them. But was it a concern that, you saw that there were several minutes there, that Mr. Johnson was, surrounded by DPS troopers and he wasn't getting any aid?
That's a great question. So the troopers actually did render aid and tried to render aid to Mr. Johnson. But that's a question for the Phoenix Fire Department, what their protocols are. Sure, that was a factor. But also was a factor is the fact that we didn't have body-worn cameras. Even though it's a snapshot in time, it's still more information. And would it have changed the impact of this case? We don't know. But I'm glad the governor actually took a final first step to deploying body-worn cameras as he promised in his State of the State address.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in one second. But I don't want to belabor this point, but I'd just like to hear from you. At what point did you see them rendering aid, and what was that aid?
Oh, that's, again, a great question. So what happened was the trooper involved that was reported to me, and again, the committee reports to me, and I make the final decision. I don't make this decision in a vacuum. But what was reported to me by all the evidence that Phoenix police investigated was that Mr. Johnson was passed out behind the wheel of the car and was making movements in the car. So the trooper grabbed the gun that was sitting there and secured that. But after that, Mr. Johnson woke up again, grabbed the trooper's vest on one side and grabbed his wrist on the other side. And the trooper had his weapon out. Once Mr. Johnson was shot, and there was 2 shots fired. One went into Mr. Johnson, unfortunately, and the other went to the car. The other trooper arrived shortly, and they rendered aid by packing wounds and calling to have fire come and took him to the hospital where he ultimately died. And it's an unfortunate situation when we have any loss of life, but we again have to follow the law and our ethics.
Excellent. Now, obviously, you are running in this hotly contested election. Now, you've mentioned the body cameras is something that you've pushed for in terms of police reform. Should you win a full 4-year term in office, you would likely, if you would, be down at the legislature, you would have an agenda down there. What would be the first thing you would want to accomplish down at the state legislature in terms of police reform?
So in terms of police reform and criminal justice reform, we had an agenda, but obviously COVID affected all of our lives. I fully believe in recidivism reduction programs, which is why I implemented a very robust diversion program. It used to be the county attorney's office charged a $630 to $1,200 fee just to get diversion, to get people the help they need to do better and be better. And that's what we want as a society. We want to see people do better, and be successful. And so I'm proud to say that we're implementing those programs. And I hope the legislature will take up those programs that we implemented, we put forth last legislative session.
Let me ask you this. We're running out of time here. There was a lot of talk, and it has been a lot of talk this year about qualified immunity for police officers. That gives them some protection in civil cases. Are you for, getting rid of qualified immunity?
I trust our judges to make that decision. I can tell you that when prosecutors get stripped of their qualified immunity, that's a serious thing. It means they have done something wrong. It means they have crossed a line. But that's what our justice system is about. That's what it's built on. So, unlike my opponent, I've never been stripped of that. I encourage everybody to look into that, but it's something that our legislature needs to look into. And I don't care who you are. I don't care if you have a badge and a uniform or not. If you commit a crime in Maricopa County, you will be held accountable. And I have charged police officers under my administration, which has been overlooked. You will be held accountable.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you, Alistair Adele, Maricopa County Attorney, running for a full 4-year term. Thank you very much, and we'll be looking forward to talking to you in the near future. Now, with the election a little under a month away, I'm bringing in our panel to break down all the big races. That's next on Politics Unplugged. And welcome back to Politics Unplugged. It's time to talk it out with Republican political consultant Chuck Coughlin and Democratic political consultant Joe Wolf. Guys, thanks for joining us here on the show. And I want to start with you, Joe. Let's start with that big breaking news from last week with the President Trump and his First Lady testing positive for COVID-19. How do you see this shaking out here politically?
Well, I mean, here in Arizona, I think there's going to be some impact. They had to cancel one of their scheduled trips, so he's not going to get any face time with voters here in Arizona doing his events. So I think that's probably going to hurt him. He's already kind of trailing Biden in the polls by, depending on what you're looking at, between 3 and 5 points here in Arizona. So I think it's going to hurt him. He's going to have less capacity, and then of course there's health implications. I do hope him and the First Lady both recover fully and quickly. But it is a false surprise here, and it's a big one that could potentially hurt him.
And obviously, everybody wishes both the president and the first lady, and really anybody else who is struggling with this disease right now, a speedy and quick and healthy recovery. And Chuck, I want to ask you: you've been, in the political world for a long time. Given where the president is in the polls right now in Arizona, across the country, the timing of this is pretty terrible, right?
Well, you might call it God ordained. This is not good information for the president in his campaign. As Joe observed, and as you observed earlier, the president had scheduled himself out here next week or this week, and so he's this denies him the opportunity of his best tool, which is the rallies and showing enthusiasm. It probably further brings back, obviously, the discussion back to the virus. I think he was using the Supreme nomination as a way to not talk about the virus anymore, but God has a sense of humor, I guess. He's going to bring it back to this kind of discussion, and we're going to keep talking about the virus with some outbreaks in Wisconsin and some other states that are swing states. You just can't get away from this, Dennis. And so it is what it is, and he's going to continue to have to deal with this issue.
All right, now from there, I kind of want to pivot and I want to talk a little bit about that Senate race. We just had Mark Kelly on. We had interviewed him earlier this morning. I wanted to talk to you, Joe. I mean, I was asking him some questions. Yes, some of them were very Washington kind of insider questions about the filibuster, these kinds of things, but they do have big impacts on the kinds of legislation that can come out of the Senate in D.C. in and of itself. But once again, it seemed like Kelly didn't want to answer a lot of these questions, and he has been getting more and more criticism for not answering questions. Does he need to start being a little bit more direct, given the fact that voters just days from now are going to be starting to cast ballots?
I don't think so. I don't think he pays a political price for that at all. I mean, he's following the Kyrsten Sinema playbook, right? He's talking about healthcare. He's talking about representing Arizona and being the independent representative in Washington that John McCain and Barry Goldwater were. He's clearly has not paid a political price for it, and I don't think he will. I mean, at the end of the day, he is leading a McSally in every single poll. We just saw the Senate Leadership Committee. Senate Leadership Fund, put I think like $10 million in South Carolina and $9 million in Michigan. There's no cavalry coming over the hills here for McSally to kind of bail her out and close that gap. So without any additional resources or push behind her, I just can't see a world where that would actually hurt him or why he'd feel obligated to open himself up to those criticisms.
Yeah, and Chuck, where do you see this race, this Senate race standing at this point? As Joe mentioned, I mean, most of the polls are, if not all the polls, really show that Mr. Kelly is in the lead. But Senator McSally, is it, what can she do here in the next month?
Well, you did your best, Dennis, to get him off script, so I give you applause for that. But his script's not going to let that happen. He's right. All of us in this little world want to look forward to, the things that we think will be happening down the road. But it is 2020, so you never know. But his instincts, as Joe pointed out, are absolutely perfect. Not to talk about these issues that are on the horizon. He talked about the issues that are in front of us right now. And he handled that well. And so, for McSally to get a bump, they were hoping that she's always run a little bit behind the president in Arizona. I think that the Senate confirmation hearings will begin to remedy that a bit and get Republicans probably a bit more enthusiastic about her. But as we all know, you can't win a statewide election in Arizona anymore with just Republicans. Oh. You have to get independent and PND voters, maybe some Democrats to move over to your side. And so if your column looks like 98% Republicans and very, very low with those other core constituencies, it's hard to see a statewide election that she could pull off.
All right, guys, I think we're over our time right now, so we're going to have to end it right there. And that is all the time we have tonight. But be sure to join us next week for more Politics Unplugged. Good night.